Hello, Admirals. Overlord Shivak here, and I figured I would go ahead and just do a quick, video doing common tactics that you can use in a game of Dropfleet. I saw there was a whole bunch of new players on the Facebook group with Battle for Earth coming out. There seems to be an uptick in interest. So I figured I'd get on Tabletop Simulator here and just go through a couple scenarios where you might be overlooking some interesting little tactics that you can apply to your Dropfleet games. So, but you know, with a grain of salt or whatever the phrase is, I'm a terrible player. I never win in Dropfleet. But maybe that's because of the opponents I fight or what have you. But let's just go through some tactics here. Alright, so the first one that should be talked about is silent running. Almost every turn, well, I don't want to say almost, but a lot of the time when you're playing Dropfleet and you've got your first activations coming on, you're going to be silent running just because you don't want to make your ships easy to be hit right away. So coming on, just doing silent running. You can't go down an orbital layer, so sometimes you will have to have your troop ships come on and not silent run for when you have a cluster that's within your thrust plus launch range for the drop ships. So that's something to think about. But most of the time you're going to be coming on turn one silent running, especially for your first few activations, because you just want to deny your opponents the ability to really land those shots on you right away. Alright, the next thing that I figured we'd talk about: torpedoes, bombers. You're going to be seeing a lot more torpedoes in play, so let's talk about things that we can do to lessen the impact of getting hit by torpedoes and bombers. The obvious one is the course change order that you can do. And what you end up doing, let's say there are 3 bombers here on this Hydra. You just go ahead, grab 3 dice, come over here, issue the course change, go ahead and do your movement. And actually with this course change, we're going to go into the find debris field. So let's say I move into the find debris field. I'll do the course change order. I'm looking for 5s to get rid of the bombers. I got rid of 1 set of bombers, so there's only going to be 4 attacks on me now. The torpedo with a course change order goes away on a 6. And that would get rid of the torpedo. So if that New York over here had launched the torpedo at double the thrust range, the Hydra would have been able to evade it with that 6. Alternatively, you can go into the debris. Oh, and I don't have the stats memorized in my head, but if this is find debris, that should be removing the last 2 bombers on a 3+, I believe. Okay, so I got a 4 here. That means there is only 1 bomber left out of this pack of 3. Just by course changing, going into the debris, you're going to take some hits from going into the debris, but it's typically not going to be as painful as letting bombers just beat up on you. So that's a pretty common tactic, and then you can also lose a torpedo in debris as well. I forget what that roll is off the top of my head, so not a great video to talk about that, but it's a good tactic to use. Dive into the debris fields. Alright. The next little thing I want to talk about is activations. If you have a group of, let's say, like 3 Jinn, or maybe you've got some Kievs, you've got 2 Kiev over here, It's really important in some list designs to have a real small group of frigates or corvettes or potentially destroyers to have a real low activation group that you can, at the bottom of turn 1, bring these Jin on from the table edge, do the max thrust order so that they get to go 24 inches up the table. They all take spikes. But then, turn 2, because they're a 3 for strategy rating, let's say my opponent over here just had the Kievs, he's got a 4, that's his lowest strategy rating. You're able to effectively come up the table 12 more inches and threaten another 6 inches. So you've got, let me scroll out here. I mean, you've got a pretty good coverage of the board right away with this group of Jin. So what you want to do is kind of max thrust and then use that as your first activation. You will be using this to take out troop ships if you're able to, or other targets of opportunity, but you're essentially going to be throwing away that group of ships then, because 3 frigates are not going to survive. But you can do that with an SR4 group. You'll be going before cruisers activate, or Jin will come in usually groups of 3 to 4. So then you just have a dice off to see who activates. If you've got 4 Jin versus 2 Kiev, and Kiev are great for popping things in atmosphere, strike carriers. So you have options, but it's something that you want to build into your list. All right. What's another good thing to talk about? Oh, let's talk about doing some ground combat, and how scoring works. I constantly lose the game because of this mechanic. Patrick just is a pro player and really knows how to use the system, but what we're going to talk about here is scoring at the end of the turn. So let's say it's turn 4 and we're going to go ahead and do scoring. I've got on each side here 3 strike carriers and 1 troop ship. It becomes really important, the initiative roll, to figure out who is going to be putting troops down first. Because what can end up happening is let's say the UCM player here has a couple of armor that they're going to place down. And they can get to these 3 sectors relatively easily. So the UCM player can put 1 down here, 1 down here, 1 down here. So there are 4 tokens essentially right here. You've got 3 infantry, 1 armor, 2 armor here, and then 1 armor here, basically contesting this. The Scourge player, if they're able to, would, well, I don't have them up the table further, but let's say the Scourge player could get to all the sectors here. If they've got the follow-up initiative when they go to launch their dropships onto these clusters, or onto this cluster and sectors, what you would want to do is just outnumber the opponent. So you've got basically 4 tokens here, 2 here, and this is a wash. So in order to win the cluster, you're going to drop another armor here, and then these 2 strike carriers would go here, And what you've now got is the Scourge player is contesting, well, not contesting, but we've tied, and there's just too many tokens right here. We've tied here. So nobody actually controls this cluster because there's no fighting going on. We've just got 2 armor and 2 armor. So it's a wash. The armor here is not going to matter because I've got 2 tokens to their 1 on this power plant. So the Scourge player will get control of this sector. The infantry here is controlling this, and the UCM player has control of this one. Now, I'm not factoring the troop ships in at the moment, but if the phase was to end right here with just these strike carriers doing everything, the Scourge player would actually have control of the cluster, because this doesn't count. Scourge player controls this, the power plant, and then we control this. So the UCM player only has control of 1 sector in this cluster. So they'll be contesting the cluster, so they'll pick 2 points for contesting, whereas the Scourge player will have 4 because it's a large cluster. So it's really important that you look at what your strike carriers are doing and what you're going to be dropping on clusters on turns 4 and 6, because putting down a token where it's not needed could cost you, winning the cluster, because both players potentially could have made that same mistake. And the Scourge player got to react to what the UCM player was doing. So, just plan for those different eventualities. Alright, I think that covers off the top of my head everything that I was thinking about doing with this video. If you guys find it interesting, let me know, or if you've got other questions, comments, tactics that you'd like to review, we could go ahead and do that. Alright, have a good one.